Coming to you from beyond the final frontier, it's Archaeodeath.
Hello, Professor. How are you? Can you hear me all right?
Hello there, everybody. Hello, Rabbi.
Uh, I have mine right here. I'm about to put it on. But before we get started, I wanted to say two things. One, my glasses make me feel like Superman, and this is something I wanted to share with you specifically. Um, there's a new trend on TikTok, Professor, where you can see a video you made the last year. And all last year, I didn't have my glasses. And so I see these videos and I'm like, oh my gosh, my hotness factor like went up 100-fold when I started wearing glasses. And it makes me kind of feel like the difference between Clark Kent and Superman, except that Clark Kent is the superhero in my head. So I think in honor of time and space, galaxy it is.
Fantastic.
And
You're going
I
going
want
intergalactic with your glasses.
I am, and I want to give a shout out to Karen Hallian. She is an artist who I have been absolutely in love with her work for probably the last 15 years. This piece, she does Doctor Who mashups with Disney characters and other like media characters. And this one is a piece I own of hers with Peter Pan, the group of Peter Pan on Big Ben awaiting the TARDIS. And that is going to be my backdrop today. The
I've
very
just got
first piece
my
I
bat
ever,
standard Archaeoden, so I'm nothing to offer in that regard.
I,
But I've got a
I
little
love
Grogo who will
it.
be listening in from the sidelines.
Um, I literally, the very first piece of hers I bought was a t-shirt that showed the top of the TARDIS and that the light at the top of the TARDIS was Tinkerbell. And then I have a piece of her mashup with Aurora because Sleeping Beauty is my favorite Disney princess. I've gotten my mom Cinderella, but that's not what we're here about today. But if you are interested in looking at her artistry, anyone who's in the comments, you can find her at karenhallian.com, and she does beautiful artwork. She really inspired me to start being able to do art. And one other piece of information I would like to get our audience knowing before we get started. Next week, on May the 5th at 12 p.m. my time, 8 p.m. Professor's time, myself, Professor Williams, Nerd Shed Projects, our resident anthropologist, and Archaeowolf will be joining us for a very special episode of How We Break Things Down. We're going to be doing the Mummy series with Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Nerdshed pointed out that they think we're going to have a lot of fun because you and I tend to be the nicer people who want to be delicate with everyone, and Archaeowolf and Nerd tend to be the ones who are like, no, this was crap and here is why.
Hang on, this is
So
going
there'll
to
be some
be
balance.
this is going to be the 5th of May.
Yes.
So that's the day before the mummy rises and becomes king and takes over the United Kingdom.
Yes. Oh my god, it's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be awesome. Yeah, I don't know. It ended up being perfect. And so I will obviously promote it. We will have some video up about it. We're gonna go through the trilogy. We will not be touching Tom Cruise's Mummy because that's the thing. So if you're around at that time, please join us for that too. If you haven't been here before, my name is Rabbi Hannah. I am your Rebel Rabbi, and I am a classically trained nerd. Um, I got with my best friend here, Professor Williams, a few months ago and said, hey, I love watching Doctor Who. You do too? Have you ever noticed there's a lot of religion? And he's like, yeah, and there's a lot of archaeology that permeates all of Doctor Who. And I said, well, you're a nerd. I'm a nerd. We should nerd together and talk about this for the masses. Like, let's put our combined brains together and then talk to see if anybody's interested. As it turns out, a lot more people were interested in it than I thought there would be. I figured it would be just you and I talking to each other, to be quite frank. But today we are at the first season of Peter Capaldi, and what we tend to do is go episode by episode, hitting any points that we find interesting that have merit, either archaeological or theological merit, talk about whether or not we like the episode. And then I believe we're going to do, are we stopping at the end of this season, or are we doing the specials and then saving season 9 for the next time?
I think we could. I mean, it's one episode, and I have nothing much to say about it. It's the Christmas special last Christmas, so we could wrap that into here if you have time.
Oh yeah, well, I'm all yours. And
Well, there's less
before we get
specials than
started,
last time, where we had a whole batch, didn't we? You know, at the end of season
seriously,
7 specials. You know, but let's see how it
before we
goes.
get started, would you like to introduce yourself, Professor? Because I kind of already
Oh, yeah,
did
I could do
mine.
that, couldn't I? Well, thank you, Rabbi. Yes, my name is Professor Howard Williams. I'm an expert in the early medieval archaeology of Northwest Europe and the archaeology of death, burial, and commemoration. And I run an Archaeodeath blog on WordPress, where I usually produce about 5 posts per month, although I'm behind this month. I've got 2 more days to do my 5. And I've been on holiday and I've been doing stuff on TikTok. And I also do a YouTube channel called Archaeodeath, and I'm on TikTok as I am here as Archaeodeath. And I'm excited by this season of Capaldi and Doctor Who, and I really can't wait to get started.
So, I have not finished Doctor Who. As you know, the first season of Capaldi I did see, but after that, everything that you and I've watched together is all new to me. So it's going to be interesting going into the next season, into 9, when I have absolutely no reference points. It's going to be very fun. But I have to say, my first impression of Capaldi was I thought he was brilliant in the first season. I loved the difference that he brings. I mean,
yes,
I love that he's not romantic, that it comes kind of back to just being on this adventure and going through time and space, and not necessarily, oh, am I going to like the companion I'm with, and do I want to like see her naked? And I love that. I think we had so many doctors up till Capaldi that is just like either obsessed with a companion like Rose, or there was had to be some kind of sexual tension between the companion and the doctor. And
it returns to the age difference. Sorry to interrupt you, but I was just saying that confirming what you say. I think the age difference, while obviously we know the Doctor is antique, so what is he by about 1,000 whatever? He's over 1,000 years old by this point. But we, the youth of Matt Smith, even though I think his character is a rather creepy, gangly, and rather asexual character. But apparently that's not the consensus. David Tennant I kind of get, but Matt Smith less so. But he had the charisma and the age similarity made it more, I think. But I think bringing that difference of age, between him and Clara, there's still a complicated relationship there. But yes, it does help, I think. Yes. So we're going to go through the whole season, just to clarify someone asking there. We're going to go through the whole of the Capaldi season 8, which I don't remember what actual calendar year 9. So what calendar year 8, sorry. Yes. What year was it? 2014, was it?
2014 is when Deep Breath, which is the first episode of the 8th series, premiered, and when we first see Capaldi. And when we left off, of course, Capaldi has just taken over for Matt Smith. I noticed something. The last time we talked about regeneration, Professor, it was violent. The violent transformation between David Tennant into Matt Smith. And it's not as violent when Matt Smith is turning into Peter Capaldi. It's just like this immediate, like, boom. We just see his, like, he kind of leans up and down he comes, and now we have Peter Capaldi. I do like in Deep Breath that they stick with this idea that because he's in the middle of his new regeneration, he's likely to be rubbish. He doesn't know where he's at, his bearings. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know the kind of person he's going to be. He doesn't know anything. He's kind of like, his brain is like scattered into a million pieces. And so he's reliant on a sort of being protected in Deep Breath at first by Clara, by Madame Vashti, and by her wife. They are the ones who now have to be the protectors of him while he heals, rather than the opposite, where we see him coming in to save the day. The first section of Deep Breath to me is sort of this juxtaposition of who is the savior and who is in need of saving.
And while you like to focus on the Doctor, I'm much more interested in the plots. And I think this first plot is another Victoriana one, which is worth mentioning, and it plays with a whole mashup of Victorian mortuary obsessions, and it basically spins off the Burke and Hare grave robbing. It was pre-Victorian grave robbing frenzy to that was not just London but elsewhere, but this is Victorian London. The dinosaur element is actually becomes a bit of a deception, but my point is that the whole plot is about a cyborg who's trying to harvest body parts to turn himself into a man piece by piece, and that's a very interesting play of actual historical phenomena we see in pre-Victor Georgian and Victorian society up to the 1850s, that body snatching and the anxieties surrounding corpse theft and selling on, not only for criminals and outlaws but also for those that could access catacombs, could access into churchyards. So this is playing off a well-known theme in our collective remembrance of the Victorian age, and a real historical phenomenon. But in this case, he's trying to. The cyborg's ship is the sister ship of the Madame de Pompadour we found in the previous series, the SS Marie Antoinette, and it's sort of headed. It's trying to get back to a promised land. And he's trying to harvest bodies, and this is the. And he ends up being impaled on Big Ben, which is rather silly. But my point is that the journey of this episode is another kind of, it takes a step back from the big apocalyptic end of the world back to a British historic epoch that has popular resonance, a popular, a well-known theme to doing the anxieties over death in that episode. There is a real phenomenon in the run up to the Public Health Act of 1839 and the various other when's the Death and Dissection Act, 1849, 50, something like that. But that period where there were genuine societal concerns, and of course, as with all things that society is concerned about, they're only concerned about it when it happens to posh people. And so no one cared what happened to the bodies of criminals and the poor. It was about when posh people started having their bodies robbed that people started to care. And this is true of every society, isn't it? And so you do have, it's a good light way of getting back to that Victoriana, getting back to that. As I said, Victoriana is a bit unfair because it's a phenomenon that shifts across from early 19th century into late 19th century phenomena, but it takes us back to that 19th century vibe, and that's and there's some sinister moments within it, and there's a bit of a Sweeney Todd overlap as well as Burke and Hare, because of course the automatons are all in this restaurant, so it's like a sort of that horrible uncanny that you think you're in a public space and then you're not, and they realize they're surrounded by automatons who aren't even eating and drinking, and then it's very scary and sinister. But it's another good example of that, the horror of the cyborg that Doctor Who's all about, of the mechanoid, that things that are part human or look a bit human enter that uncanny valley and they're scary as shit, and we can use that as a trope over and over again in so many permutations, from Cybermen to Autons to it's just the thing of Doctor Who. They love to play with humanity and humanity's edges, and we keep repeating ourselves in this regard. But I think it's not our fault we're repeating it. It's because the show is all about that.
It is, and I think one of the things that the deep breath brings into really sharp relief is two things. One, you already mentioned, the uncanny valley. They're in the restaurant and they realize they're surrounded not by quite humans, but they look human enough that it's startling and unnerving. And that is something that we find in humanity. That's the uncanny valley, this idea of that electronics, robots are going to start to look so much like humans, it's going to start to make us uncomfortable. And the other piece is what makes a human human. We know this android is looking for pieces of humanity, these parts, and to try and become a man. But I think Doctor Who often asks the question, what makes a human human? What makes someone personhood? What gives someone the right to personhood? And
I hadn't thought about it until just now, but can I say, of course,
yes,
we don't know it at that episode, but the very fact that the cyborg is uploaded to heaven, we don't know this yet, but it's only just dawned on me, because the robot is uploaded, he has succeeded. He has become human. Because
he has.
Missy has uploaded him to the Time Lord, the Time Lord database that this is the meta plot for the series, and I of course I forgot that, because when we get later on we realise that this is all. This is the whole of this series is again about mortality and heaven and the afterlife that's to become, and all the characters that die associated with the Doctor get uploaded there, and you realise this is happening on a universe-wide scale or an Earth-wide scale to feed a new master plot. But the point is, this is all about our anxieties over mortality and the afterlife, and that. But I hadn't really thought through that, coming back to this first episode, that the very fact that, having been impaled on Big Ben rather incongruously and implausibly, and rather amusingly, in my opinion, he does appear in this heaven, a corporate heaven, is actually proof that he got there in some way. I don't know. I thought of that.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you're correct. And what I think is it reminds me, and I don't know if you ever saw the movie Bicentennial Man. But with Robin Williams, and it's based on an Isaac Asimov book about a robot who on a journey to become human. What can we say is really human? And it kind of gives me obviously much more morbid vibes than Bicentennial Man did, but this gives me the vibes of that theme, the idea that intellectual life has become sentient enough that they want what humanity has. Ultimately, for me, this bad guy, this villain, doesn't seem as villainous when you understand the depth of what he's wanting and what he's looking for and what he's willing to pursue and willing to do to get to heaven, to get to paradise, what his idea of eternity is. So it's hard for me, even though he's done a great deal of harm, and we know he's turned a lot of people into these automatations. It's very hard for me to dislike him when I think about what it would be like for him to want the same thing everyone else in the world takes for granted. And so it's very hard for me not to like him. I like that they introduced in this episode Madame Vashta, her wife. I like that there is some nuance to be had about Clara being faced with her own prejudice about Madame Vashta. Madame Vashta goes around, only has her veil unlifted when she's around people she can trust. So I think there's also that parallel. You see her during the middle of this episode decide she needs her veil again because, as she tells Jenny, because I'm not in the company of people whom I can trust. And I love, as a cheeky thing, I like that the Doctor, we find out he can talk to dinosaurs. That's just kind of a little bit of cheek that I like. And I really love that the companions are not afraid to look at Clara and say, the Doctor is the Doctor. The face here is just the outside. It's just the window dressing. He's still the same person whom you have loved and cared about. And we know Clara's not really attracted to the Doctor in a sexy way, but as we can attest to, you are my best friend. I don't have to want to run away to Paraguay with you for me to have a relationship and love you. I bought
tickets. Paraguay's happening, isn't it?
I love you. But the point is that relationships come in all kinds of ways, and they develop in all sorts of ways. And I think that Madame Vashta explaining to Clara, if you love the man, what this looks like shouldn't matter to you because it's still the same person. And I think that parallels right into this, this man who wants to become human. I think those parallels does it matter what you look like at the end of the day to be someone who is human. So, and I like that we get, because like you said, the overarching theme, the meta arc of this season is that idea of this heaven place that we're introduced to with Missy, and the fact that he arrives there, does that say that there's more to humanity than just flesh and blood? And I love that kind of wrap up for this particular villain's arc. And I don't know, I couldn't hate him. I couldn't hate him. And I liked I liked Peter Capaldi's first foray. I like when he talks about his eyebrows being, they need to annex. They look like they want to annex and start a state of their own from the rest of his face. And that they kind of loop around to, why does he look like that? Well, because he took the face of that man he met in Pompeii. That's really what it comes down to. Because as we know, Peter Capaldi was in the fires of Pompeii. And so, I like that they kind of shoehorn that in to say, well, why
it, or
is
is it my misremembrance that he says it's like a promise? Is that my misremembering?
Yeah, no,
it's like a promise to the people.
It's like a promise. And he says, I don't know why I chose this face. There was something important about this face. So I really love that. And that he talks about he's got battle eyebrows. For some reason, as you remember, I cracked up and had to pause it because I was like, okay, I'm going to have to take a minute after the battle eyebrow scene. So that's my thoughts on Deep Breath. And those are my notes. Is there any relative archaeological significance or places that they go to that you'd like to highlight from this particular episode?
Well, I mean, it's classic 19th century London scenes that captures in. Big Ben gets used to impale. You get the Thames. They keep coming back to the Thames. The Thames, for people who don't know London and don't know the history of London, the Thames is everything, right? I mean, it's a basic point, and people forget this, but of course, so much up until very recently, up until the 90s and noughties, London had looked away from the Thames as the most polluted river, the most, all its docks had emptied. The Thames has become a sort of embarrassing sort of, basically just a sewer. But right the way through the cultural history of London, from its Iron Age origins, Roman city, then Middle Saxon Emporia, late Anglo-Saxon, Anglo-Scandinavian city, Norman, so medieval Tudor, and so on. All the periods of London, London's wealth, power, or connections rely on the River Thames, and so I think it's almost like an unconscious obsession that the show has with the Thames, the ice fairs that we're going to come on to again. We're going to come back to the ice fairs. You haven't seen the ice fairs, but they've talked about the ice fairs. They're constantly going on about the ice fair. This is part of, and when we go back to the Fourth Doctor, of course, the talons of Wing Chiang, the idea of sewers and subterranean London and the river and the sewers. This is all part of this Victoriana and this obsession with the long-term history of what lies beneath the city and its river flowing through it. That's not really a historical point, really, just to say I think it's important backstory. People easily forget about London, the history of London, and the industry, the commerce, and the cultural. Every story from Great Expectations to, every story about London is about the city of London. Even see war films, Second World War films, propaganda films, they're always about the river. There's this constant use of the river as a metaphor for Britain, for England, and for London's life. So it's a constant theme. And Doctor Who plays with this again and again. So that's just a random point, but I think it's quite important.
I love that point. I love that point, and especially from the perspective of someone who lives there. I think that I can appreciate these places and the architecture, and even, as you mentioned to me, the archaeological significance of these places, but have never been there. It doesn't resonate with me the way that it does with people who have their everyday life be something so meaningful.
Well, I think some people dismiss it as tourist London. Oh, it's got all the sites in it, and you have to get in a bit of. We're going to come back to a bit of this later in the series. We've got to get in the main sites, so people who don't live in London, who are tourists, international tourists, know this is London. In the same way that we're going to come on to talk about the Mummy and how the Mummy 2 betrays London, where it completely moves all the buildings so they're in the same alignment. But actually, the London of was it the Next Doctor with Morrissey, David Morrissey, isn't it? Next Doctor.
Yes.
All of these Londons are actually quite geographically accurate, because they have to be, because they were for a British audience and people would know and laugh if you go, let's, it's not, this isn't like Robin Hood with Kevin Costner where you can get off a boat at Dover and you're on Hadrian's Wall within an hour. You have to have some kind of historical geographical moorings that people are going to believe, in the same way as I don't know the detail of downtown LA, but people would know if you're suddenly at the Mexican border having just been smoking a cigarette in the center of LA, and then the next minute you're in Portland or something. People would know, wouldn't they? So you have to have some kind of mooring on people's, and I think Doctor Who does it quite well. They want to show historic London in different episodes, and so I think generally it's quite good.
I do too. I love that. And I like that they show these places more than just tourist places, but places that actually are living and breathing and an intrinsic part of the people who are in the surrounding areas. It's sort of like the way that I feel in certain American films that the actual city plays as much a part of as character as the actual actors themselves.
Well, I mean, it's a fictional city, but Gotham in the DC universe is a classic example. It's kind of an alternate New York, I presume it's supposed to be, isn't it? I mean, I haven't really looked into this at all, but
Gotham is supposed to be Chicago.
Oh, sorry. But my point is, it's a kind of what it's supposed to be in relation to North American cityscapes, and it's a flip of that in different ways. Yeah. Anyway, I maybe that's not analogous, but anyway, it does. So
then we are on to the next one, which is Into the Dalek. And this is where we get introduced to Danny Pink. Since I started off my thoughts on Into the Dalek on Deep Breath, I'd like you, if you don't mind, to start us off with Into the Dalek.
Okay, so after the introductory episode and the adjustment of the Doctor to his new face and his new body, we are into sort of, the school. Clara's in the school. She meets the maths teacher, who is a ex-military dude. And this sets up a really interesting dynamic that runs through the whole series about Danny Pink and the tensions between different Pink ancestors, descendants that we encounter. So that's important. And you can talk more about that if you'd like. But I think that's interesting. And of course, he doesn't like the military identity of Danny, even though the Doctor has been happy to play with Unit, is happy to spend all this time with Unit. Suddenly he takes umbrage at a squaddy, basically. He takes umbrage at having to interact with a teacher who is, basically in his second career, having been in the military. And of course, Danny Pink classically, not in this episode, but later flips this back at the Doctor and said, "You're exactly like the kind of officers that I've had to deal with, the kind of entitled little," basically he's telling the Doctor, "You're the entitled little prick that would get people killed." And that's exactly what the Doctor does. And he has him nailed and the Doctor knows it. So, that tension is really interesting. But in terms of the episode, the obvious other reflection of Doctor Who on humanity and what is to be human is what is the antithesis of humanity, which is the ultimate space Nazis, the Daleks, who are the automated and the last remnants, obsession with purity, obsession with purging themselves of emotion, of any kindness, of their collectivism, their obsession with destruction and of anything that's not Dalek. But this goes into the Dalek, and there's one thing that episode and that theme aside, there's the only thing I really have to say about this episode is, of course, the two things. The nickname, the Doctor calls the Dalek Rusty and says he's a good Dalek in the end. So this really works. Yes. Another bit of Capaldi's humour is so on point with this. And then I suppose, but there's a great funerary archaeology line, which I love. It says, "Nobody guards the dead, mortuaries and larders, always the easiest to break out of." Which is it's a clever line. It's also it's a line that mentally, as an archaeologist who, it does my brain. It makes me go crazy, because at one level the idea is that mortuaries, places where the dead are stored, and larders, food are stored, are things that people have traditionally in human societies guarded. Now, human bodies go off quickly if you don't have ways of freezing them, and people in the past did have ways of pickling the dead, freezing the dead, keeping the dead on ice, metaphorically and practically, ahead of funerals. But in most funerary cultures, in Jewish tradition, in Christian and Muslim tradition, because of the climate, you have to dispose of the dead very quickly. or things start to happen. And it's about showing it's not just about practicality, it's about respect and honouring that person's remains, right? And in that regard, keeping the dead guarded is something that is very important for a short period of time. And so people do guard the dead. And of course, historically in human societies, and let me put it to you in a very stark way, because I think people forget this. If you don't guard your larder, you're not going to die now. You're going to die next winter. Right?
Yes.
So people know.
Yes.
People know. Think of the Magnificent Seven. Think of the poor Mexican village. They know that by giving their money, they're conceding to the bandits their stores. They are going to starve in 6 months' time. They might as well get a bullet to the head. Right? In the same way as you have that horrible scene in the Road film with Viggo Mortensen, he's taking away taking away the food of that guy, and he leaves him naked, and that guy is just in tears. He knows he's not going to die now. He knows he's going to die in 5 days' time or 3 days' time. He knows it's up. And the horror of starvation. Someone said to me, I saw a TikTok, somebody saying some banal comment about, the way that people died in the past. Oh no, it wasn't. I can remember where it was. I won't say where. The way people died in the past was violence. People killed each other. That's the chief way people died. No, you fool. The most people die in the past through disease and starvation. And the larders in early complex societies where they're having sedentary occupation, the larders need to be protected. They need to be protected from other people. They need to be protected from rats. They need to be protected from infestations of insects. You keep your larders, your grain stores, your food stores, you keep them as safe as you can. And so for one thing, I'm sorry, I'm going on a rant from a single quote. It's a clever quote. It's a conceited quote, and it's a great little line, and I love it because he's basically saying in the mortuaries and larders always easiest to break out of. But of course, they're the places you would in historical societies guard people getting into. That's probably irrelevant to what we're talking about, but I just felt I wanted to go on about that.
No, I love it. I could listen to you read a cereal box. You know that. You could talk about anything and I'd be interested. I didn't have the connection to this particular episode that I did to Deep Breath. And I think that's because when it comes to things like the idea of humanity and what makes us human, I think that touches into my theological ideology as more. But I do like the idea between I think we have a lot of ethical questions that happen in terms of the Doctor, and this is one of them. We have this inherent being that is known as one of the biggest evils. The biggest bad has been through and through. The thread kind of through all of Doctor Who is we have the two major bad guys, the Cybermen and the Daleks. And here is this one villain that is saying, no, I'm not a villain. I'm actually the good guy, and I want to be accepted and seen as a good Dalek, as seen as a good person. But knowing that the only thing that makes a good Dalek is having that kind of hatred for things is what actually is the bar that good is measured in for Dalek society. So I find that interesting, and it reminds me of was it this episode? And I apologize, I have not slept well, so my memory is a little fakakta right now. But there was an episode you and I watched together with the Brigadier, not the Brigadier, but where the Daleks were dressed in, they were being used as weaponry. And it kind of harkens to that for me a little bit.
Oh, the Ironsides.
Yes, the Ironsides.
With Churchill. There are secret weapons, Doctor. That was that was 2 series ago, wasn't it?
Yeah. Thank you. It almost kind of does that for me a little bit, where it's like he wants to be good, but what is good to...
Would you care for some tea?
Hey, and they have their little battle stuff on. Yeah. Something brilliant. That is interesting to me as a little bit of continuity that I love is that in this episode, scenes from the episode Dalek of 2005 and the episode Journey's End from 2008 gets seen in the background as the Doctor merges with Rusty's mind. And he also then in this episode refers to his first encounter with the Daleks on Skaro. And that happens in 1963, 1964. To try and bring my A game, I wrote a lot of notes for this series because I feel like oftentimes you're ready with the notes, and I'm like, no, he's not going to outdo
No.
me. I'm gonna.
Oh, it's competition now, is it? Competition now. I see where this is going. Our very modest audience, but we're competing, right? Well, let me point. No,
no, I just wanted to make sure that I am rising to the same level as my esteemed colleague here, rather than making you carry the whole thing. And I just
Grogu
so I
is
wanted
judging.
to make sure.
Look at those judging eyes.
I'm going to tell the Shire Rat that you had Grogu judge me.
Yeah, go on. No, sorry, tell me your notes. Tell me your thoughts.
That for me, this is such an interesting dichotomy between good and evil again, because we know something I talk about a lot, given my personal job, is good is subjective. So is truth. Or as they would say in Indiana Jones, if you are looking for truth, go down the hall to Professor What's-His-Face's philosophy class. But if you're looking for facts, then you stay here. Good is also, I think, something that is subjective. What I would see as someone who is a good person or has good intentions, you might look at and go, they're a complete twat waffle. Because it's all based on our own biases, our own expertise, our own experiences, and how we view the world and how we view good and evil. Whereas Peter Capaldi's doctor is battle-ridden. He has been to war multiple times with the Daleks. He, I think, has a hard time seeing that anyone in the Dalek Empire has any redeeming qualities, because he's just seen everything. But then to counter that, we have Clara, who does not know much, has not encountered as much about the Daleks as the Doctor has, and has this ability to say, well, maybe this one, the optimism to his stoicism, maybe this one might be different. And I do kind of like that. I do like that a little bit. That was really it for me. It was kind of fun, but it was not something that was awe-inspiring. And I have a few episodes where, that I'm like, this is like a pinnacle episode, and it's made my top 10 list of all-time Doctor Who episodes. And this is a good one, but it's nothing that I would, jump up and down about and get super, super excited over.
Okay.
So, but
we're not rating. We're too cerebral for rating, aren't we?
We don't rate. It's just kind of a discussion on how we, and if we were to rate, like maybe we should do that, kind of make it live where we talk about our top 10 favorite episodes and why we chose them. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to make that note right now. Right now. But it does take us into the Robot of Sherwood, and I love this episode.
I hate this.
I know you do. I know
so annoying. Robin, bloody Hood. He's so punchable. He's not even. Anyway, not even Men in Tights funny. It's all right, really. It's just, come on. Anyway.
I love this episode, but admittedly, I have bias because Robin Hood is one of my favorite Arthurian type myths. Would it be considered Arthurian era myth, Robin Hood? No,
well, it's the era. No, absolutely, you're right. Yes, sorry, it's not the era from whence the story of Arthur is supposed to be mythically, legendarily set, but it is the time when the chivalric dramas of Arthurian late medieval culture are being discussed. I suppose it is Arthurian. I don't know. That's a literary question. I don't deal with literary stuff, but yeah, I get what you mean. Hi, John. Lots of people joining. Spiritual Squirrel Box.
Growing up, Arthurian legend just fascinated the ever-loving heck out of me, and so did the tales of Robin Hood. The idea of this vigilante who gave up his riches, his power, his wealth, and decided to live a life of mediocrity in the ability to try and help the people around him. For some reason, that I was always, as a child, and even now, I'm almost 47 years old, and Robin Hood is still one of my most favorite, literary tales. And yes, I would love to go to Sherwood Fortress and also Tintagel. So, when I come there, these are places that you'll be like, you're going to have to take a little bit of time off. And so what we're going to have to go and do is,
I mean, they
that.
make him deliberately look like a mashup between Men of Tights, Robin Hood, and sort of Errol Flynn, don't they? They deliberately make
They
him
do.
look. And that's the point, is they are playing into this isn't believable,
Yes.
or is it?
No, it
and
is
then
a fun episode. It is definitely a fun episode. And I do think that the outfit is more Men in Tights. Cary Elwes, he has that weird over-the-top way cadence to his voice that Cary Elwes kind of did with his projection, and he is flirty to the point of like exasperation, you know. And here's Clara, of course, who's grown up on the idea of Robin Hood tales, and the whole time she's kind of swooning, and then we have the doctor who's just rolling his eyes the whole time, like, oh, it's this guy again, you know. And I love that the reveal kind of ends up being that they're robots. There's something about it that it's like, we're going to take this classic tale and we're going to turn it on its ear, and it's fun. It doesn't have a lot of deep meaning. We're not going to find any kind of real theological evidence here that we can deep dive and use to help our own spiritual connection to the divine. No, it's really just fun. To me, it's just fun. And I know you have completely different take on this one. Just the moment you were like, I hated this.
Can I say something positive? I'll say something positive.
Yes.
Now, in this episode, the positive thing for me is the settings. They've used 3 filming locations. For external shots of the castle, it's Bodiam in Sussex, famous castle of Edward Dallingrig, that is full of visual illusions and conceits and chivalric ideals. It's the ultimate medieval chivalric castle for many people's popular imagination. So Bodiam Castle is for the external shots, and that is something that everyone should know and respect, that they picked the ultimate 14th century moated castle, right? The second point is for the internal shots, they picked the greatest, largest castle in the entirety of God's own principality or kingdom, Wales. In other words, Caerphilly Castle. And Caerphilly Castle is a vast, huge edifice of a castle. And what's really important is that they filmed it inside Caerphilly Castle, where they had the archery tournament and so on, using pieces that I can't remember the word for it. They've actually Cadw reconstructed some of the battlements with the canopies there, and you see all of the people, the actors, the supporting actors all waving and watching. So they're using the modern heritage experience to film in a very intelligent way, to use externals of Bodiam, which is easier, simpler to understand, and not as it's like a generic. Yeah, it's a castle, without any thought going into it. But they've gone inside at Caerphilly because they're filming in Wales, so they can have that view. And the third site that they used is a site they keep coming back to and will come back to again, which is Cosmoston Medieval Village, not far from Cardiff, which is a reconstructed, they've built medieval style buildings over the site of excavated medieval buildings. And we will come back to that site again and again. So they've got a rural scene from Cosmoston, and then we've got 2 castles, one used for inside, one used for outside. And we've seen castles again and again being used. We've seen Harlech Castle being used for external shots, where they're making androids out of the flesh, the flesh episodes. We've seen so many. Casteth Koch, just outside the Red Castle, just outside of Cardiff, used in the scenes of the with the Cybermen episode where they're attacking the castle. So medievalisms are throughout Doctor Who, and Robin of Sherwood, of course, Robin Hood has to. The plot's one thing, but my point is, in the historic time period's another thing. But it's the fact they're using heritage sites as the settings, and I think that's really interesting.
As a sidebar, Spiritual Squirrel Vox says at some point I need to get you to sing me a Clannad song about Robin Hood. So I'm gonna write that down.
Hooded man. She's been bothering her neighbours with that. So I'm trying to literally drive him to insanity by playing it at full volume, apparently.
Well, I'm writing that down as we speak. That's going to have to happen. I think it's fun, but it is more of a filler episode for this specific series, and I don't think it really has too much other than it's just kind of an adventure, and you kind of get to see Clara get giddy. We get a little happily ever after as they fly off in the TARDIS. There's Marion like standing behind the TARDIS for Robin to be able to reconnect with. And he is kind of a rascal, during this, he's flirting with the heck with Clara, knowing full well that we all know that he loves Maid Marian. But at the end of the day, he's a man who's red-blooded, British male who's going to apparently, flirt with anyone in a cute skirt. So, I just think that's kind of a fun one. So are you ready for listen, or do you have any other things you'd like to point out about Robotic Sherwood?
Listen's fine. I don't have much to say about Listen. It's another one about a being that you can't see, and it's a bit spooky. And they go and encounter a young Danny Pink, and it's part of a broader story in that regard. But I don't actually have too much to say about it, other than it takes you back to the Doctor himself and a bit of his backstory. But no, I didn't. There's nothing that I could really connect into an archaeological or mortuary theme, unless I've missed it totally.
I don't think so. This is, the only thing I see there is that we can derive that at some point in his childhood, the Doctor lived on a farm of some sort, and there was to me, there was at least a little bit of emotional abuse, because there's this child who's afraid and being told, buck up, rather than be afraid. And again, we see the developing relationship that's starting to happen between Clara and Danny. But she's also having to hide part of what she is and who she is in order to maintain this relationship with Danny, because she's not ready to let Danny know, hey, by the way, I happen to travel all through time and space with someone who looks like he could be my dad. And it's all good fun. There's nothing for you to be worried about. But Danny, I think they did Danny wrong in the overreaching series. I do. Only because I believe that Danny was a character that could have been much more fleshed out, given so much more depth than he's allowed to. And I feel like he ends up being almost two-dimensional.
Given our criticisms of the previous Black British sort of major supporting actor, I had nothing. Danny Pink was a real gift to them to really develop, and I'm a bit sad. British black male, could have. Yeah, I agree. Let's leave it at that.
I absolutely think this is where BBC fails, or not BBC, but the writing team really fails with this character. Is they had an opportunity to create a character that was so three-dimensional, and they just kind of ended up making him into this trope. And I do have some anger about that, given that their history of the way they treat and the way they write black characters in Doctor Who. I don't really have a lot to say about this, other than we get to see a little bit of the Doctor's history. We don't really, there's not anything of real theological significance that happens in Listen either. We do see kind of ends of each of these episodes and people showing up to Missy's heaven. But that's really nothing to write home about either until we get farther into the series. So if we, not to try and skip over, but given that the meaning of these are to really talk about the archaeological and religious significances of these episodes, and there isn't much here. I'm completely content to go on to Time Heist.
Yeah, let's do it.
If you are.
Let's do it. Yeah, absolutely. And Time Heist is, for me, it's about a bank robber and a time, the Bank of Carabraxos. But for me, it's about the aesthetic of a bank as a pyramid, a bank, the ultimate bank that is, it's Egyptology, it's Egyptomania, it's Egyptian, Neo-Egyptian, Egypt in outer space. The idea of treasure and ancient Egypt is really being played with here. That a bank, and they play with this in two ways. Firstly, the bank is Egyptioid, Egyptianesque. I don't know what the
Egyptian identified or inspired. Yeah.
It's like it's a pyramid, right? And the vault contains a mummy. So some of the treasures within the vault, the vault. There's lots of other things we can talk about, including the horror of a creature that sort of literally sort of sucks your mind out, isn't it? There's lots of things we can talk about there, but for me, the overriding thing is that this is about this is about a bank heist in which the Doctor is actually. It's a time game. I can't even remember the complex details of it, but the fact is, it's the Egyptian theme that I wanted to just flag up. That's all I have to say about it. I enjoyed that episode very much.
I like the episode. I will say this, and this is not in any way to malign your work, but could we say that this bank at Calabroxus is almost like a bank version of the British Museum?
I knew the British Museum would come up. Yeah, I mean, I think that I think it's very much it plays with the idea of our ancient art and archaeology as commodities, as things to be kept and kept in the most vicious way by the bankers. They're putting so much effort into protecting this. And, with all the security and the obsession with power, control of access to this resource. And so I think it's more than appropriate that the Egyptian theme is there, as I was trying to allude to, really, by saying it's about archaeology as theme for the bank and the treasure hoard, the treasury, and the treasure within is archaeological too. And it's clearly been extracted and robbed from funerary sites.
So that's really my only thing is I noticed that it kind of reminds me of and not just the British Museum. I'm saying that because of course it is a British show, but I think it kind of shows that the way that people want to kind of keep items in, even if they really should not be kept personally. This is a bank that values these items that really should not be in the hands of any one person. But that's ends up what happens here. So I really do not have, except to say that I really enjoyed it. I like the episodes that kind of make us think, oh, what's going to happen next and how did we get here? The poor creature, I don't like the way the creature is treated. I love that we see the release of that creature and his ability to go off with its mate.
That's not the first time the mate getting back to one's mate is a theme that we've seen in other episodes, didn't we? That's right. But this one is the one being kept as hostage to force it to do the horrible things, Mm-hmm. And it's a constant theme of pity for animals and beasts that are made into monsters. We see that again and again. Yeah. And
I think it does. They do create this idea that this beast is a monster when really it's not. It's just trying to survive, and it's being used against its will. And if my mate was being held hostage, I guess what would I do to be able to secure their safety and be able to get back to them? So I do kind of like that and understand that, but there isn't a lot of theological significance for me in this one, other than just how we treat our fellow living beings. That's really it. So the next one is likewise for me. The Caretaker,
funny episode based on Alien in a school. It's okay, but
we've seen that before with Anthony Head and Alien in a school. I don't have very much. I do not have very many notes on this one either, except we just have a little bit more Danny. Some things back and forth between the developing relationship between Danny and Clara, but there's not really too much going on here. Except, of course, with continuity, John Smith, he uses that and has been using that since 1968 in Wheel in Space. That was the first time John Smith came into being a pseudonym for the Doctor, or his, nom de plume. So I do kind of like that. And of course, at some point he mentions River Song, but there's not really a whole lot that goes on here to me also that has any theological significance. Which brings us to Kill the Moon. Now I know that the episode. Oh, please! I see your face. You're making a face. Go for it.
I'm not making a face. I would say that Kill the Moon is literally the worst episode ever created of Doctor Who. It is literally the nadir. It is the shittest, annoyingest idea, apart from maybe a forthcoming episode in this series about episode 10. So it's in competition with The Forest of the Night, in The Forest of the Night, whereas the most stupid Earth-related the most stupid Earth related Doctor Who episode. And it has all the components of being another moon-based, should we do something evil to save the planet, or are we actually going to destroy the planet? Should the moon die or should the moon live? And it just turns dumb. The whole idea that the moon is a giant egg. I mean, it's just, can I just?
It is ridiculous.
Can I just leave it there, please? I have nothing to say.
No, for me, it's interesting, but again, they're using this like, whose life matters more? That's the only thing that I can take away from this is like, at what point do we draw the line between who ultimately is are the beings that we care about more? But also, I don't have much to say about it. I remember watching it with you, and when realizing the moon was this giant egg, going, really? This is the plot they came up with?
Don't even joke about it, spiritual squirrel. It's not even funny. It's not even teasable. It's just so insultingly mind-crushingly stupid as a concept that I just can't. It may actually be true. No. It's just like, and a new one's born that's the same mass of it, and therefore the Earth's tides are not going to be destroyed for a century or two. It just doesn't make any sense.
And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because if we think about it, much like Raiders of the Lost Ark, even no matter what, here comes the egg, it's going to be replaced right away, so no one was in actual danger to begin with.
Which makes it all the more annoying, actually.
You made an entire episode that hasn't. It doesn't matter what happened.
Why do we care anymore? And the spiders, what were they living off? What were the spiders living off? And why did they eat the people in the space? I've been waiting there for millions and millions of years to have one chow down on a spacesuit in space. It doesn't make any sense. No, that was just so. That is not. Don't even start that. It's only a story, Howard. Like, it's only a game of football, Howard. It's only a game. No, it's not. It matters, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you're never going to hear it's only a story from me, Howard. You know better. I will always.
But you know I'm not. No, come on. I know what these tone policing wankers on TikTok go, oh, look, there's someone getting angry. But, I don't get angry a lot of the time. It's very rarely I lose my cool, but you just saw it, and that's happened. It's happened now. It's happened now. It's all over.
No, normally,
it's all fine. Nothing to see here. No drama.
Seth, every time you get passionate now, I notice Seth puts up little emojis of you punching rams, and for some reason that is delightful to me. You chunky little ram.
Yeah, that relates to an earlier story. I have punched a ram once, okay, and it wasn't animal cruelty. It was asking for it.
When they think archaeology is just dull, then you find out, no, you get the opportunity sometimes to punch rams.
I'm going to stroke Grogu's ears to calm myself down now.
Okay. Yeah, you were getting a little heated there. You're a little flushed. Deep breaths. It's okay. It's okay, Professor. Okay. So, this brings us to Mummy on the Orient Express.
Oh, in contrast, that's fantastic. An absolutely brilliant episode, isn't it? Because it's ridiculous because you've got a train in space and based on the Orient Express, and you've got that retro vintage theme that plays up nicely. So you have the historical past as aesthetic, right? And the idea of a mummy, so it links into Egyptomania and the 20s, 30s, the time of the famous discovery by the other famous Howard Carter. And Lord Carnarvon's funded excavations in the Valley of the Kings at the tomb of Tutankhamun. So you've got that, all the packaging of that interwar Egyptian, intercontinental European elite travel, right? And the horror of a mummy that's coming to kill you on a timescale, the foretold. And the foretold appears in the vicinity of an artifact, a relic. And without, well, let's ruin the plot. You all find out is that there's a perfectly plausible explanation that it's the last remnant of a ancient war that we don't even know exists, and he's a soldier that's being repaired, and he actually just wants to die. And it's another monster is actually
allowed to, yeah.
So it's a brilliant episode. It's classic horror, Doctor Who horror with the interwar aesthetic, with a bit of Agatha Christie mixed with early horror films. It's perfect. It's one of the it's sort of saved after the Moon literal disaster episode. That episode just brought it back and was, was just a joy. Yeah.
I loved it, but I love that kind of 20s, 30s aesthetic. The idea of the Orient Express has always been thing. I love Agatha Christie, so that kind of backdrop was really interesting to me. I loved the idea that this soldier just wants to be allowed to rest.
Yeah.
That at the end of the day, this soldier is like, I've done everything I'm supposed to, and yet you are keeping me in torment. And for what reason? I don't want to be repaired. I want to, be left to my go on to my reward, as it were. I like that there's a couple of throwbacks. We have a couple of times when we get the "Are you my mummy?" Of course, that's a reference to the Ninth Doctor and the empty child. The Doctor dances, and the 10th Doctor repeats that question, of course, again in The Poison Sky in 2008. So I do like that they kind of bring it around because we're dealing with the mummy. There's a little bit of mummy reference to previous episodes that involved mummy type. Or even just, we know there was no mummies involved in the Doctor Dances or the Empty Child, but just that question was kind of a fun way to tie them together.
And so it also has, Frank Skinner manages not to ruin it, which is another good thing. You won't know Frank Skinner. He's a British comedian, and he doesn't ruin it despite his presence. They have a celebrity caretaker, Garrett Kai, who's played by Frank Skinner. And it's the kind of thing where some of these celebrity drop-ins distract, and he survived. It survived that problem.
I do like there's a little bit of jealousy here that plays out towards the end of the episode between Clara and Danny Pink, because Danny reminds Clara that the Doctor is not her boyfriend, something that the Doctor says succinctly in Deep Breath, where he says, I don't know who I am, but I'm not your boyfriend. He says that at the end of Deep Breath, and here's Danny saying, that the Doctor is not your boyfriend. And I think they don't give her enough credit to know how she feels about any given situation. I think she knows that the Doctor is not her boyfriend, but once again, a lot of times relationships in media are only portrayed a couple of ways. We don't see any type of platonic relationship that is deep and unabiding that gets played out in media. And I think this is one of those things that is happening, but because people aren't used to seeing it, there's pushback from Danny going, he's not your boyfriend. There's even pushback again from the Doctor, who is like, I'm not your boyfriend. And I think it's even kind of confusing for the Doctor and Clara in terms of there's an expectation that if you're a straight person, that you cannot be friends with another straight person of the opposite sex, because ultimately you're going to fall into some romantic trope, i.e. when Harry met Sally. Can people of the opposite gender be good friends without having it go weird? And I think that's something that they try to explore, but ultimately they use their characters like Danny to push and say, it's weird that you have this kind of connection to another human being that hasn't gone like tits up. So those were part of my notes just on the psychological, sociological kind of impact of the way they're presenting. Yeah, I'm just going to shut up now. But it was so fun for me. And yes, I think it was a turnaround from watching that Moon episode, which was utter shit. Utter shit. So okay. There's that. Which brings us to Flatline. So if you'd like to start us off with Flatline.
Yes, this is another good episode. Very strong episode.
Yes.
And I didn't like it on first viewing, and it's grown on me. And we're back to the quotidian, we're back to the daily, the mundane. But there's important heritage dimensions to this that I think people need to be aware of. That this is going to be a historic artifact moving forward. I just remember, of course, that the leader of the work gang who are painting out the graffiti has a big role in Andor. If you haven't seen Andor, then I just made that connection. But anyway, the idea is, I think it's supposed to be Bristol in the modern day, and people are going missing. And the plot is that these two-dimensional beings are basically sucking those people into a two-dimensional plane, and they're trying to experiment with being three-dimensional. And in that regard, it's got a horror element, but for me, the way they use the contemporary landscape, this is a time of reflection on what is graffiti, people being memorialized as graffiti. And there's a one of the what we now call a sort of flash memorial or a temporary memorial to those that have been lost. And Clara goes up and looks at it, and they mock her and the work gang who are painting out the graffiti, and then they realise, and Riggsy, who's the sort of actually again a better black character because he's actually a nice chap, and he's not a
yeah.
He's supposed to be
they do write him better.
Youth offender who's been given punishment is not custody but is community service, right? So but they managed to escape. I mean, again, I'm not a black person, but they seem to make him slightly more nuanced than the standard young black man going, oh, I'm a bit edgy, and look, oh, I'm not too bad actually. But they actually make a sort of bit of a rounded character out of it. Yes, there's some of the cliches there, but there's a bit more. And the other heritage angle is they use a heritage line in Bristol. I think it's Bristol. So there's a historic train. There's a 1950s diesel multiple unit in this 2010 world that is used so they use a heritage line. I have to check out the filming locations, but they deliberately use a historic heritage line as part of the action, a train and the dynamic with the diesel multiple unit. So I think there's a number of different archaeological elements of the recent archaeology. See, people got to remember, archaeology isn't simply about ancient civilizations. Archaeology is about our material physical environment, including our recent past. So you a lot of the anxiety and the horror surrounds about wallpaper, bad art on the walls. Is it bad art, or is it actually a human skeleton? And you realize, so there's a lot of reflections on decor, on furnishings, fittings, on suburbia, on on tunnels, and I think that is archaeology too, that industrial, post-industrial landscape. And so I have a lot of enthusiasm to emphasize that point, that's as much archaeology as other time periods being represented and time themes played into, such as futuristic Egyptomania themes, such as the Bank of Karabraxos, or indeed the sort of the Orient Express in space. You've also got the way they deal with our landscape. This is one of the best episodes I've said this about previous series, best episodes that show our world, that are going to become good historical documents on how people thought about our landscape beyond the standard soap opera, crime drama scenes. And that's why, Morse will be great as a detective series for thinking about Oxford in the 80s and based on the Colin Dexter novels. These episodes of Doctor Who are a great document onto our 2010s Britain, I feel.
I feel like I had to have you almost explain some of it to me during this episode. And I do remember that some of the 2D, I was like, what is that happening on the wall? And I do remember you having explained that is the nervous system that you're seeing kind of happen. Yeah. And I like that they took kind of an artistic touch with that. I loved the character. I think that this is proof to me that they have the ability to write nuanced characters who are people of color, and they're just kind of lazy unless it fits their narrative. And so that was something that did bother me. I loved that Clara got to be doctor for the day and kind of step into the shoes. That's the other
and point. She leads, doesn't she? Yeah.
Yeah, and that see what it's like to have to deal with all of the things that go on with the doctor's head. I do like that, you see her carrying around this TARDIS in kind of the palm of her hand. That was just a little bit of fun for me. Mostly it's just, I like the way that they use street art, which to me is a completely valid form of expression, to get across some of their points about what we would call project areas back in early days.
You said it better than I. That's what I was trying to get at. Yeah, areas that are run down, areas that are And I think it's not. It's not making it. It's done it in quite a subtle way, because it's not doing this massive inner city deprivation and every second person's a crack addict and there's mass knifings and
like that.
It's Doctor Who, for crying out loud. It's not some it's not Law and Order New York or whatever version of New York. There's so many of those different Law and Orders and CSIs. It's trying to. It's Britain. We don't shoot people. We knife them. It's perfectly civilized. But it's But I'm joking, and I shouldn't say that because I'll get banned on TikTok probably. But my point is, it's calmed down, and but it does get across some of those points in a subtle way, and I think it is a good episode. So yeah, I don't have anything else to say about it. Do you want to move on to the next one, or is there anything else you'd like to?
Absolutely. No, I'm happy to. I think this next one is what, In the Forest of the Night?
Oh, we're not, as a not. I don't think, on reflection, it's not as bad and ridiculous as the Moon episode, but it's almost as bad. So, having had some really good ones, we'd end into this. The overall plot, to ruin it, is that the trees now to talk to each other, which is fine, but they're able to react to solar flares and save the Earth by creating an oxygen shield by growing overnight. And so the whole of London becomes a forest, and it's just so dumb. They could have made it interesting by saying it was over a year or 7 years, or just anything. It's just like, Grogu, come here. I need Grogu. But my point is, sorry.
I do like to see Danny kind of in action, taking charge, and we see him rather than just a maths teacher. He has some ability to kind of take on, and we see that his actual ability lies beyond just his him being a teacher for, as you guys put it, maths. I don't understand that, but I'm terribly American, so there is that.
I'll do the maths.
Yes, I do think that it was kind of an interesting episode in terms that it does not have a lot of there's not a lot of fill to it. It does not have a lot of weight to it.
The only thing I can say archaeological about it is that, of course, they use Trafalgar Square and the lions of Trafalgar, the famous lions of Trafalgar Square, and the fountain as the landmark anchor. So they use another great London landmark to sort of draw both international audiences and British audiences into understanding this is London, but you got Nelson's Column, Trafalgar Square, it's an iconic, city centre, cityscape scene for what's going on. Yeah. So I think, Dougie 55 loves the lions. Yeah, but it's a way of drawing people into that public architecture, and that has we could talk about the imperial story of Britain and Trafalgar, and simultaneously beating the French and Spanish fleet in 1805 and the patriotism of Nelson, and talk about, and we could go on about how great the British Empire is at this point, but I know that won't go down well. I'm teasing. But my point is, we can talk about how, cityscapes are patriotic ventures. They are invested with patriotic discourse and imperialist discourse, and that is the tourist attractions are still the public art of the 19th century is doing that job. And these shows are all showing you, like Doctor Who and every other show that shows Trafalgar Square is playing, is reflecting on that legacy.
Anyway,
that's all I have to say.
I don't think that there is much feel to it except the backdrop. I agree. I think that the landscape they use, the area in which they're filming this is much more interesting than the plot itself. And we just see a little bit more I start to have this feeling that I do not understand why Danny and Clara are pursuing a relationship with each other. It seems forced to me. It seems a little bit forced. And I don't understand the dynamic. And it's sad because I like Danny, but I think Danny actually deserved better than Clara. And I know I'm going to get some hate for that. But I do think that at the end of the day, I think Danny deserved much better than Clara gave him. And that always makes me sad because you could see how much he cares for Clara and their relationship as it goes on, how much he cares for Clara. But I don't feel like I just think that she deserved to date a rock or something, like a piece of bread. Just based on the way she treated Danny, I didn't like it. That's it though. I think that the backdrop is much more interesting in terms of the episode than the actual episode itself. So there is that.
So the last two episodes are a pair, The Dark Water and Death in Heaven, and they are absolutely they come down, whether we like them or not. We have to accept that the whole series is heading to a mortality finale. That the whole theme of what's been happening to all that we've been seeing throughout all the episodes, people uploaded to heaven, and Missy is revealed as the new manifestation of the Master.
Of the Master. I love her. I love her so much.
So evil in a good way. It's great. And in these pair of episodes, there are so many ways this links into mortuary archaeology and themes that we have to mention. And I feel I'm not sure how to articulate, but we have to start off with the fact that the very filming locations. It starts off in Cathays Park in Cardiff, with the War Memorial. There is the focus. So it's in Wales, in Cardiff, capitals. That's where they're filming. But then we also have St Paul's Cathedral. Is absolutely integral to the plot. This is obviously the rebuild of St Paul's Cathedral after the Great Fire of London. This is the iconic landmark of Britain and London. This is the St Paul's that survived the Blitz. This is the St Paul's that survived came from the fire. It symbolises the endurance of Britain against adversity. The faith of Britain as the Anglican Cathedral. It's where we've seen funeral after funeral of great people. It's both above ground and in its catacombs. It is a literal museum of the greats of Britain, from the tomb of Duke of Wellington, the tomb of Nelson, the tomb of Lawrence of Arabia. Everybody has a memorial or a tomb there, and of course that's because it goes back as the burial site before the Great Fire version. That the original St Paul's goes back to being the first Christian church in post-Roman London, the burial site of Saxon kings of Essex and then later England. It is an icon, and it is a site that, therefore, to be usurped by an invasion. That's why they keep going back to St Paul's. If it wasn't clear at all, it is a sacred and symbolic icon of Britain and London, and therefore to have it subverted, and you've realised that again St Paul's is where the Cybermen are coming forth from this cyber heaven, this nether sphere, where they're basically in their water tombs, which is very Egyptian, this idea of sort of cyborgian people living in water tombs waiting to be animated. Is a really disturbing theme. And so that's why St Paul's is important. That's why war, death and cemeteries. And the idea is that the whole of everyone who's been died has had their soul stolen.
Yes.
And
yes.
kept alive. But the problem with this episode, can I just one final thing before I hand over, is this caused outrage. This caused outrage when it was aired, because the underlying narrative is that when people die, the manner of their disposal in this fictional world, they are still sentient to what happens to their body. Now, there's no reason why they had to do that, but it's a disturbing horror thing. But the idea is, if you're going to be cremated, you will feel you're being burned. If you are being, so they have this whole, and it's a funny dark turn, but I think it went darker than they thought, and they got a lot of complaints. I think it's one of those complaint-ridden episodes, because what it was actually saying to people, anyone that had experienced a loss, was it was saying, people, I mean, you could say, well, come on, it's just fiction, but actually it's really dark to make people think about that, that idea that if you choose to burn a loved one, you are making them suffer as if they're in the fires of a medieval purgatory conception, and don't cremate me, the dead are screaming, is what they get through. And the idea that the harvested souls become Cybermen and then are being sent out as an army by the Master and by Missy to retake the world. Cemeteries are reopening. The dead are rising as Cybermen, which isn't the first time we've seen the dead rising as Cybermen.
No.
There's another. This idea of resurrection in a new form, but the funerary landscapes, the cemeteries, the cathedrals are so important to this journey. But the idea of the water tombs in the Nether Sphere is also really, really scary and sinister too. Anyway, that's my ramble. They're the themes that I got from that episode, and then that really everything that plays over into Death in Heaven is the graves reopening, the morgues, the hospitals, the dead rise again, and Danny saves them all by
Yes. So for me, I loved this pair, but I do remember that it got people complained a great deal because they didn't like the idea that, yes, even though it's a fictional world, here are these writers saying that how you choose to to place your loved ones in the way they're for their resting is going to somehow affect them. It did play into people's sensibilities, but this isn't the first time that Doctor Who has pushed religious ideology and really hit back at, what are we saying? It's to the point where it's ludicrous. It's ludicrous to believe we have no evidence to support that. They're gone. Your loved ones are gone. Everything that we're doing in the after is really for us. It's for our own way to move on and honor them and be done with it. Now, one of the things that was huge for me is here's Clara trying to blackmail and try to underhandedly get the Doctor to help her save Danny rather than just coming to her and coming to him. And when it is revealed that didn't happen, that he knew what was going on, there's this moment between the two of them where she thinks that's it. He's going to never talk to her again. And because she hurt him, and he says that he's like, you could have just asked and you could have trusted that I cared about you enough. And he says this, go to hell. And she's like, yes, I understand. And he's like, no, that's what we're going to do. We're going to go to hell and we're going to get Danny. And she's like, why? And he's like, I don't understand how you think that you hurting me would ever change that you are my friend. And to me, that is like a pinnacle moment in this series to solidify that the Doctor does not see people the way that people often see each other, that it didn't matter to him that she hurt him. All that mattered was this is a person who he cares about. And in the scheme of things, so my feelings got hurt. What does that have to do with whether or not I like you or you're important to me? So that moment where he's like, what's that? I think what does that have to do with whether or not I'll help you? Or what does that have to do with whether or not I care about you? And I'm like, oh. And then, of course, I have to say, Missy is freaking phenomenal. The actress who portrays her, the moment where she's like, well, I couldn't go on just calling myself the master now, could I? Well, yes, you could have. I mean, but she just portrays Missy in this, I think, better than the last incarnation of the Master. I mean, he was crazy out of his mind, but she has this simpering, sweet undertone to her voice patterns while holding a gun to your head, or saying that, like, let me fix my lipstick before I kill you. And just her way of the bravado that she brings to this character. Oh, my heart. But I love the way that they tackle the idea of the afterlife. And let me really quickly say hi, Dan. But the way they tackle the afterlife in this two set of episodes is just interesting to me. And then, like you said, we've seen Doctor Who tackle where the death of people have turned into Cybermen. We've seen the dead be turned into Cybermen before. And then we have this instance, because I'm going to because they kind of connect together, I'm going to use the two episodes concurrently. I love that at the end of the day, it's the Brigadier who comes and saves his daughter. He saves Kate.
Yes.
And you just see him.
Yes, the Brigadier as reincarnated Cyberman. And which is really powerful because they keep that distance. So there's so much about resurrection and ideas of redemption here, I suppose. And I think it is one of the most powerful. It's ridiculous as a plot, like all Doctor Who's are, but it's I think it's really powerful. It got to people. It got to people in a good way and in a perhaps unintentionally bad way when it came out. And I think it is one of the. It's not the best episode I've seen, Doctor, but I think it was really important for thinking about issues of mortality and what the dead are doing in their graves. What do we think? And that most people, whether they're of faith or not, haven't really fully worked out the relationship between body and soul, because different traditions since prehistory have had these different conceptions that the body still matters. That's why we do a burial. That's why we do this, but try and respect the dead. And obviously some people have a very literal understanding of this and other people have a much more sort of, floaty, wishy-washy, they're sleeping now. What does that actually mean in real terms? A metaphor, a motif on the grave, a euphemism to use at a sermon. But my point is, I think that this really, try to challenge that. These pair of episodes really challenge that to push it into people's faces a little too much. In a good way, though, because it prompts conversations then to happen about, well, what are we really talking about when someone's in a grave or in an urn or lost at sea? Do we really think they're lost because we haven't found their body? Do we really think that's anchored their soul in some regard? And I think that in that way, I think this pair of episodes, does important service for kids and for broader audiences who may not be thinking about these issues. And I think it has more theological and also archaeological import for thinking about the landscapes. I know that perhaps not only Brits will know, that, but some of these cemeteries and some of these churchyards and St Paul's Cathedral's particular significance. But really, I think anybody, like when we saw the Manhattan episode, they were using a Welsh graveyard of Llanelli to film that. It's a generic Victorian, Edwardian, 19th, early 20th century graveyard. We get the environment. The angel comes and drags Amy back. And this idea of it's a space that's and we get graveyards again and again. And we've got more coming in future series. But I think this episode really brought that to the fore. This idea of the graveyard as a space of memory and reflection.
I love the way you say that, because it is memory and reflection. I mean, as a Jewish person, what we go when we to a graveyard, we leave a stone to let the person know we've been there. So I do think that it is a very good way that they've explained memory and reflection. And it makes me mad because these two episodes together are so well done that I look to other episodes like the moon egg and a few others, and I'm like, well, but you did this.
They could have just cut those episodes out and no one would have cared. Yeah. And this one is so important. And basically, Missy has tried to not rob, like all the other master plots are about taking over the world. She takes over the dead. She takes over the ancestors, and she's mobilizing the ancestors against the living. And the ancestors fight back. The brigadier fights back to save his daughter, So in that regard, I think it's a real powerful episode. So I like it. I like it a lot, and I think it's the
moment with the brigadier in the graveyard, and you see him, and you just know that that's who it is, and like even now it's just like, ooh, I get a little. And the same with I'm sorry, it's right there. The same with Danny. Here's Danny, who is now pouring out his heart. She's saying she loves Danny. I think, again, Danny deserved way better than he got with Clara. Just so much better than he got with Clara. And he ends up doing exactly what a soldier does. And in turn, we see his disdain for the doctor, because he sees the doctor as this general.
It does restore us, because you've got to remember in 2014, British soldiers have been in Afghanistan, they've been in Iraq. It was already an area of controversy about the various roles of Britain in those conflicts. There's a backstory of other conflicts we could go on about right the way back to the Second World War, where British service people have been in UN and British, you don't need this history lesson, but it's important to understand the contested nature of the professional army in Britain and around the world, and how it's seen. And so Danny was trying to tackle that role, and obviously he achieves his personal redemption from whatever atrocities he committed. And we, to
be able to do this, yes,
in doing this, and it does. But it does. I mean, does it? You could say it lets off the hook. I don't think that's perhaps fair. It does sugarcoat the role of the military. It does say, look, these are good guys put in bad situations. He not only does he become a teacher, but he saves the entire world. He can, small people can do big things, cliche, but it does at least show an arc. And he does conclude Danny's role, but I think it's a real shame, because I suppose the only other thing to say in relation to Danny is we do see that awesome pink. We do see the other pinks that are going to contribute to the human exploration. That he may be a little person, but his his legacy
timeline. Yeah, his legacy is going to be huge.
On. So I suppose there's a lot of optimistic things to say about Danny's character, and I did think it was the first. Well, apart from it's the second major POC sort of sidekick role that really worked after, and I've forgotten the name.
Martha.
Sorry, I was thinking. I began with an M. Yeah. So Martha. Yeah, that was a proper assistant role. But my point is, we're going to get more, and we're going to get other effective ones. So you're going to be excited by the next one that comes up. But I'm just saying, it's too. But my point is that I think Danny. I wish Danny had lasted longer, but I think and I'm frustrated by his role. But I think it was a vast improvement on some of the other POC characters in previous series. Yeah.
I think for me, I also don't like the way the Doctor and Clara left it. They're both still kind of lying to each other. She's convinced the Doctor that Danny is alive. He's not. He's saying he's going to go off and find Gallifrey, and they're both, you can see the unease, and they're like unspoken words of, has he forgiven her for the fact that she hurt him, and she doesn't want to deal with her own mourning. I think that's kind of part of it, is her inability to want to accept that Danny is gone and that she could have done better. I often wonder if that's part of her remorse, is that she should have treated Danny with much more respect and care than she did. I love seeing that the Brigadier saved Kate. I hate that we kill off Osgood, because Osgood was like, I loved Osgood as a character for UNIT. I just did. The fact that she would come in dressed as classic doctors. Yeah. So seeing Osgood go really bothers me. And then of
Osgood
course
was great. All these characters get other opportunities on audio books and stuff, but it's sad to see them go within the main series. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, at the end, in our mid-credit scene, we get Santa Claus, knocking on the door of the TARDIS.
Oh, I forgot we had to do this episode. I was ending on a high. I thought we were going to end on a high, but we should do it. We should do Nick Frost as Santa Claus.
Do the Christmas,
it's funny,
and then
but is it good?
It's funny.
I mean, it's okay. Did I need it in my life?
No.
Grogu isn't
what's
sure.
sad is I actually
Grogu isn't convinced. He needs to have his ears
Nick
stroked.
Frost.
He's
I love Nick Frost as an actor. I loved him in Paul. I love the stuff he's done with I can see his face. Redhead, Scottish guy. Simon Pegg.
Simon Pegg,
I love the stuff him and Simon Pegg have done together, and I understand why they cast him as Santa, but
I think that let's just say it was an interesting episode in terms of the idea of which dream they're in, caused by these monsters that take over them, and they're all in the dream. And it's a good little. I think it's a good little episode. But and Santa is real in that dream, and they have to get out of it. And it's anyway, it's fine. I don't have anything else to say. There's no mortuary angle to it other than it's and
it's just kind of gross. And there's a couple of points of it where it's just literally, really?
Yeah. It's another brain-sucking alien creature.
Yeah, like
we've had them before. We'll have them again.
Enough of that with
They're very,
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, go on.
I like seeing Clara as an old lady. That was kind of fun for me, but that's just it. Yeah. It wasn't great.
I suppose what we should say then, if I can move on to say that we're already started watching together season 9, but season 9 again, Capaldi it's not a failing of Gomez, Capaldi, what's her face, Clara Oswald's character. The acting is there. We're going to get. I don't want to ruin it for you, but we've got another special multi-series extra guest coming in. We've got Osgood coming back. So you won't have the end of Osgood, and we have one of the best endings with Heaven Sent and Hell Bent as a pairing of end of series episodes, right? For season, so I'm not going to ruin it any more than that. Yeah. And then we get River Song again. So there's a lot of exciting stuff to come. You will be excited to watch it.
You know how I feel about River Song. She's my second favorite archaeologist.
So but the thing that I'm really excited about to watch with you is The Girl Who Died, because it's Vikings. Vikings. So we're going to get Viking Doctor Who meets the Vikings. It's really, really bad and good at the same time. And some people hate this episode. I love it, and I have plans to write an academic article all about it, but I haven't finished it yet. But I tell you, we got a lot to come.
I need to apologize. I mistakenly said that Simon Pegg was Scottish, and he is
not.
not.
It's
and
just
so I apologize for that.
Star Trek.
I apologize.
Is that why they were saying that?
I've only
Birmingham,
seen him.
yeah.
So I just So I want to apologize for that. So, what are your final thoughts on the 8th series? I'm not
a proper
year.
fan who reads all the comments and reads all the determinations of this stuff. I'm just going off my own stuff here. I'm not a real nerd Doctor Who fan. So if people correct me, but my feeling is that season 9 enters the end of the classic Doctor Who with Tennant and Smith. We're into substandard stuff here, but it's not substandard consistently. There's some shite episodes that drag it all down, but some of these best episodes are easily better than some of the standard Smith and Tennant episodes, to me. So I think there's a lot in this series, and there's a lot in season 9 we're going to come on to that are better than anything that Tennant and Smith did. But there's also some real filler episodes that really we could have easily done without. And I think to be a killjoy, I think what I've seen of Jodie Whittaker was more of the same. Some really good bits and then some real shite. And I think you're going to have trouble with Jodie Whittaker. I think I'll be interested in what you think of Jodie. I think you're going to have trouble with some of the storylines that try to be, well, it's not that they're woke. It's just that they're a little childishly trying to address relevant issues, and it's just like, oh, really, are we doing this? And it's not that they did it, it's the fact that I don't think they really had the maturity and the adeptness to handle some of the more politically charged plots that they did. So, but I think they tried, and that's good. So I think that the next 2 seasons of Capaldi are some real stonking great episodes. So it's not a consistent downward trend. There's some really great episodes. Whittaker, I've only seen one series of, and I just want to promise there are some really good episodes, and there's some really bad archaeology that I can rant about. And there's, it's really worth us doing this episode by episode, because I think we are picking out some things. But yes, we're past the peak. We're past the classic Tennant and Smith, but it's not all bad. And there's some great episodes coming up that I think we're going to have a lot to talk about in season 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13.
So I love that at some point there is going to be where both of us have not seen any of these episodes. So neither of us are going to go into it with any sort of knowledge. And I'm kind of looking forward to that. And I'm going to love that. But yes, the start of season 9 that we have watched so far, I've liked. There's been a couple places where I was just like, oh, come on. But I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
You will. We know each other and we're friends, but you will encounter a prejudice of mine coming up, and it will seep out. We make jokes about things, but I do think I have to. This is a confession to everyone on social media. I do have, because where I live, and it's not a general, it's not a deep seep. I have a prejudice, and I have to confess this now. And it comes out in the last season, when we finally get a Liverpudlian sidekick, and I do think I think we may encounter some scousophobia on my part, and I just want to confess this now, that I don't hate all Liverpudlians. There's some lovely friends of mine who are Liverpudlian, but that character just triggers me in ways that perhaps shouldn't trigger me, and I've got some work to do. Is what I'm saying. I've got some inner work to do to realise maybe I do have a prejudice there against people from Liverpool or Merseyside more generally, because that character really got under my skin in season 13. Really, really grinds my gears in a way that shouldn't. And I think it is a problem I need to address. And I might be doing long videos, apology videos on TikTok. If this gets called out, I'll have to do lots of work. I'll have the whole of Liverpool against me. It'll be in the news, but I'm declaring it now. because I think it's going to seep out one way or other, because he really annoys me. His hair annoys me in ways that are unmentionable and unexpressible. His nose annoys me. His accent annoys me. I don't even know who the actor is, but there's something that is innately
Oh,
infuriating about his Liverpool Pudlianosity. And I just want to say, I know this is not good. I know this is something I need to work on. People from Warrington, I don't mind. People from Widnes, actually, often maligned, but good. People from Wigan, people from, even people from Birkenhead, I'm okay
well,
with. But this character, he brings out prejudice in me, and we need together to confront this. I'm
I
on a journey here, and I need to get her through this. So stay with it for
I
season.
will say, I think that acknowledging that is the first step for you being able to get better. So I appreciate the strength and the vulnerability it took for you to admit this in such an open space. And I hope with help that
With help,
you find
we can
yourself
get
being able.
over it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that you at some point um, are going to be able to come to grips with it and really work through
I
that.
think it's a long
Yeah.
journey. It's a long
And
journey.
I'm,
I
I'm with you. I'm
yeah.
not going to abandon you just because of your biases. I'm here for the long haul.
I
You
think
know
we may
that.
even
You know
have one
that.
of those documentary series about me going to meet some people from Liverpool and sitting down with them, and they say, so,
I
and
can't
I go,
believe this
well,
with you.
I respect you people. Oh no, I didn't mean you people. I mean, no, I understand. These kind of, you see, you're prejudiced now, eh?
It's,
Calm down. Oh no, I've done it again. I've done a stereotype. No,
um, just as long as no rams are around, I think it'll be okay.
no, no. But I just admit, one of my anecdotes when I first came to lecture at Chester, right, and back in 2008, I've taught students from all over. I can even understand Seth's accent. She said, "Oh, you won't understand my Doric accent." I have no problem understanding Seth's accent. She's on here. I've travelled and talked to people I've talked to drunks on trains from every corner of the British Isles and beyond. I can understand everybody most of the time. Even thick, Eastern European accents, Southern I'm fine with. But when I came to lecture at Chester and I asked a question of the audience, of the students, I said, so what do we think this shows us? And I heard this, and I went, sorry, could you repeat that
Professor.
again? And I went, that's one view. I said, anyone else got a perspective? And I didn't understand a word he said. And I realised
Oh,
that it was. I did have to get
Professor.
used to the Liverpudlian twang, and I really didn't get what he was saying. So,
Oh my goodness. So, okay. Well, I look forward
I'm
very
only
much
teasing. I'm
to
only joking.
I know. Anyone who thinks that Howard is completely serious, that the professor is serious, has never spent any time around the professor. Just watch a couple of his videos. He's got one currently up about the wild haggis. Something that everyone should be aware of, especially
Yes.
because there are a lot of people who believe they've domesticated the haggis, and we know that it's gone into extinction. So those are some
Sad,
things that we
sad
should
time.
point on.
Climate
For
change and
me,
overhunting.
I'm looking forward to the next series. I'm going to plug a couple things for the both of us, for those who are in the room. Next Friday, May the 5th at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 8 p.m. for the professor. Please join him, Nerd Shed Projects, our local anthropologist, and Archaeowolf. The four of us are going to get together. We are going to do a breakdown of the archaeology and theology of the Mummy series with Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz. So I'm going to put it up so anyone can register. I'm going to, of course, have a video for it this next week. Yes, the Bone Daddies will be together. And then Nerd Shed and I are just going to be along for the ride. I'm very excited for that. You have no idea. Of course, Professor and I will be back again to discuss Series 9 as soon as we have finished it. We will have that next episode up. And then I know there's not a lot of people in here, but I'm throwing around. We do this on the regular. And my spouse has kind of said that we should probably podcast that. And I think that, I don't know if that's shade, where she's just trying to point out that my voice is better for radio, like that I have a face for radio, or no, it's a joke. Oh, Howard, it's a joke, Professor. It's a joke. It's a joke. But, and if there are any other kind of pop culture things that you would love to see the professor and I sit here and spaff on about, yeah, please let us know. As something I'd like to also plug just in my personal life, because I live in America and the amount of anti-trans bills that are being passed on the daily, I would encourage everyone, there's a link in my bio to go to and support the Rainbow Railroad. It is an organization that helps relocate trans families from states that are going to deny them health care to states that will help. And you're going to be able to find that in my bio. Is there anything that you would like to plug for yourself, Professor?
No, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, how can I plug anything after that? I mean, it's such a bleak time and such a vile circumstances that we try to keep things upbeat on our channels and try to talk about things that are constructive, but all of this shit in the background just so exhausting. Yes.
I think we help, though. Honestly, I think that bringing a little brevity, and even if for a couple hours we're talking about things that maybe in the grand scheme of things are not important, but they are, because people need hope. And I think us talking about Doctor Who and the way that Doctor Who gives people hope is a positive thing. Also, Karen Hallian is one of my favorite artists. This is where I got my background from. You can find her at KarenHallian.com. I cannot believe I feel like we're professionals now. I don't even know what to say about that. As always, it's a pleasure. If you like the scarves, people have been asking a lot in the comments. Yes, you can actually purchase them. I am the maker of these scarves. However, there is one season I will never make again, and that is because it was a gift to my dear friend here for his birthday. So every other season is available except for season 14, which is the one I made for the professor for his birthday. And that was because, as is notably apparent, Nerdshed and the professor are my ride or dies. So there it is. There we are. Thank you all for joining us today. As always, you're going to find this on the professor's YouTube, probably in the next 24 to 48 hours.
Yes.
At Archaeodeath. You can look him up right there. He has Twitter, of course, across all the social medias. You'll find him Archaeodeath, Twitter, Instagram, the whole bit. I encourage you, if you're not following him, you should. Yeah, he delves into subjects of archaeological importance that I think are relevant, especially the way that society portrays certain historical times. So if you are not following him, please do. And we hope to see you again next Friday. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody. And thank you so much, Rabbi. Take care.
Always.
Bye now.
For relaxing times, make it Archaeodeath time.